Slurpty diddly do, my G's. Hope you guys are all doing well. Alrighty then. Today's just going to be a little quick mini tutorial on 20 EQ slash frequency analyzer tips, frequency spectrum guidelines. Someone left a comment on my YouTube channel a little while ago saying, have you got like a cheat sheet for frequency spectrum? And I just created one this morning. And I don't really like to use rules because I really am a big advocate of just breaking rules with music production. So although I've made 20 rules, please feel free to break them as well, okay? But I will run through them with you here, and I've created a little image that you can go ahead and download for free. You can put it on your, print it off and put it on your wall as a poster, or you can make a beer mat out of it. I don't know what you want to do, but it's free. You just have to head over to my Patreon, and you can download it for free via that platform. While you're over there, if you want to shoot me a couple of euros for an alcohol-free beer, I mean, that's completely up to you. I mean, that's depending on how generous you're feeling today, isn't it? But anyway, I thought there might be a lot of confusion from some of these rules that I post up, so I wanted to just talk over the rules a little bit now quickly. If you really get super confused and you want to have like a full-on conversation, then please join my Discord and do it in there. Don't make me make 12 new YouTube videos to respond to your questions. Anyway, so here are my rough guidelines, which are meant to be broken if you want to. But yes, so let's start off with number one. So a little bit of where things typically sit, certain elements. So sub bass between 30 and 60 hertz. That's the right range for the sub bass, in my opinion. Keep lows intact, so I don't EQ out ever the low end of the sub bass. I know some people do. Some people like to do linear phase EQ at 20 hertz or something. Personally, for me, I always just keep all the lows in. Yeah, and I know a lot of other top producers that do the same. Mid bass, and we all have different ideas for music production approach. You can say, oh, this other YouTuber said you can go up to 70 hertz, and it's really not that serious. All right, it's all good. We're all one wonderful music family. All right, so yeah, keep the lows intact though. That's a really important thing for me. Mid bass extends from sub to high, so no need to cut highs. So yeah, there was this old wives' tale of shelving off the high end of your bass, or high cutting your bass to make room for stuff in the high end. I always keep all the highs in my mid bass in. You can adjust the balances if there's anything super too bright or something, but generally you want a full spectrum mid bass. Kick 60. That's quite low, isn't it? 60 to 150 hertz. Yeah, I like subby kicks sometimes, but yeah, somewhere in that range I think is great for a kick, roughly. Again, retain lows. So again, here I really don't like to low cut my kick at all. Same with the sub. I like to keep all of that low end in, all the way down to 0. Sidechain with sub, no high cuts. So yes, because I'm keeping all that low end in, and I used to think I've got to low cut the kick to make room for the sub. But realistically, all I do is just ensure I've got a great sidechain between the two, and then I don't need to low cut the kick as well. I can just fix everything in the sidechain, and there's a lot of other great producers that do the same thing as well. No high cuts again, so yeah, I like to have the kick full spectrum with all its high end in as well. Snare 200 to 500. Roughly again. 200 is really nice, low, powerful snare. You could maybe go a little bit lower if you want. 500, you're dealing with more like minimal rim shotty kind of snares. So there's a wide range for where the fundamental of the snare can sit. It's fine. Optional low cut around 100 to 150, but keep the core frequency. So yeah, if your snare fundamentals at 200 or 250, I will low cut this one usually. Because then I don't need to sidechain it with the sub. It won't really get in. It won't really interfere if I take the lows out, and it's not like a super low end sound where I need that low end power from. It is more of a mid range thing, the snare. So I do low cut the snares somewhere. Making sure that I don't disrupt the actual fundamental low end part of it though. So just low cutting it somewhere a little bit lower down. Cymbals and hats, low cut at 400 to 1000 hertz, adjusting for mid-range character. So yeah, this is the adjust. It's quite a big range I've given you here, because a lot of the time you've got a lot of like character and weight and nice frequencies in a hi-hat around 400 or 500, and sometimes you want to keep them in, and sometimes you want to just use the high part. But I would never really go too high so that they become tinny, you know. But that range, like between 400 and 600, where you've got the mid-range, it can conflict with other elements sometimes. So it kind of depends on your composition. But yeah, there is a great sometimes sometimes it can sound great to leave that in depending on your composition. So you've got flexibility there to adjust like how much of the mid-range character of the hi-hat you want to keep. Okay. If you've got like a really full-on like massive Reese, like you're gonna have to probably take some more out or sidechain between them a bit in the mid-range, you know. Breaks and fills. So if you really want to hear like the break, like you're using a little, you're displaying a little special effect of a cool like classic break, or you're using some like really cool like tom fills with a lot of like low end in them and stuff like that. As long as you compose it well, you really can leave, you know, a lot of the low end in. So it kind of depends again on how you're going to use it in the composition. But I would technically, usually for my breaks and fills, I kind of EQ out like the space for the sub if I want to keep the sub running with them, you know. But I'll often leave in a lot of the low end on those. Again, depends on the composition. You know, you can EQ up higher if you want to, if you've got loads of other sounds in your mix. But there's room for flexibility there, of course. So non-kick and sub sounds. So basically anything that's not the kick or the sub. Low cut around 60 to 80 hertz to avoid conflict with the sub. So there's no other sound, in my opinion, especially on your drop, that should contain any frequencies below 60 to 80 hertz apart from the kick and the sub. So if you've got anything else with that rumble down there, you need to get rid of it, you know. And rather than looking on every single channel, if you group things properly, you can just apply those cuts on your groups always that are not containing the kick or the sub. If you're talking about in your intro and you want to get a bit more experimental using some rumble, that's cool. But here I'm talking about on your drop, making sure that you're only prioritizing the low end frequencies for the kick and the sub in that area, you know. Okay, to avoid any conflicts, you know, keep the kick and sub clean. Vocals and leads, low cut under the fundamental, keeping essential tones intact. So here's a case of two other groups, for example, vocal groups or lead groups, where you want to take out some of that low end rumble, and you just want to make sure that you don't go up too high, that you end up deleting the sort of main fundamental power of the vocal or lead. Yeah, of course, if you're doing some like random background stuff with it and you want to low cut it more, like you just take more mid-range out, you can. But you know, if you want to like keep the power of the vocal or lead, then take out the rumble but leave the fundamental intact, you know. Sub and kick, this kind of just hammering this point home. Keep low end intact. So again, like I don't take out any of the low end of both of these sounds, and remove rumble from other sounds. Yeah, so this is kind of a repeated point because it's very important for me. So make sure you do remove all of the rumble from everything else that's not the sub or the kick, and sidechain to perfection between the sub and the kick. You know, it can take often multiple sidechains till you've got it right. One sidechain sometimes isn't enough to completely get that perfect cleanliness between the sub and the kick. You know, you don't want to go overboard, but you don't want to underdo it either. You want to just keep fine-tuning that balance. Reverb on drop, low cut around 500 to 1000 pre-save headroom. So yeah, I'm talking about generic, you know, big reverbs that you just throw on stuff here. You know, if you're doing sound design, you're adding little tight reverbs like in the mid-range, like that's kind of a different story. But if generally with reverbs, 500 is sort of the minimum where I would cut everything, you know, below of that out. So because obviously 500 is the mid-range area, and you're going to have other sounds that are in the mid-range, and your reverb will completely eat up those other sounds if you leave it in, you know. So when you go up to 1,000, you're really kind of in the safe zone, and you can start to stack many reverbs on top of each other. But even between 500 and 1,000, you've got to be careful. But below 500, absolute no-go for me for like general reverbs on the drop. In your intros and breakdowns, again, you can be a bit more experimental. And if you're doing little tight reverb sound design stuff, again, you can be a bit more experimental. But in general, 500 is a great rule to low cut reverbs always. Okay. Mid-side EQ. So yeah, the important thing with this is just really focus on cutting side low frequencies. This is really the main use for a mid-side EQ for me. You know, I don't really have to go too much more in depth with it ever, so it's not something to get super like hung up about. You can fix most of your sounds with a normal stereo EQ, and the mid-side EQ for me is about clearing out the space in the sides usually, you know, in the lows particularly. Sub frequencies, so no side information below 80 hertz on any sound. Yeah, it's not really possible for a speaker to replicate a stereo image so low, so leaving side information in on anything below 80 is just kind of always going to eat up your headroom unnecessarily, so you might as well always take everything out at 80 hertz, you know, on your groups and things like that. But yeah, depending on how high you want to take out the sides on what group, that's up to you. That's where you can get nice balances going on between your different groups. And here, for example, where I've written side cuts, cut bass at 80 hertz and drums around 150 hertz for stereo room. This is just one example of how you could potentially, you know, give a bit more stereo priority in the low end for your bass, and keep your drums a little bit more mono in that sort of between 80 and 150, so you have a bit of separation between the two groups. So that's a really cool tip that I like to use a lot. But you don't have to do it that way around. You could do it the other way around. You could have your drums a bit wider at the bottom and your bass a bit narrower. But I prefer like a bit more of a warmer, wider bass, and then yeah, adding the stereo of the drums in like a little bit further up. Yeah, but you can definitely have a bit of stereo around, yeah, between 80 and 150. Like it's quite, it might seem quite low, but it's quite nice to have a bit of stereo down there, in my opinion. Whole spectrum. Avoid over focusing on low high cuts. Main issues are in the mid frequencies. Yeah, so this is like something I just noticed from more like beginner students or people who they've been told, you know, you have to cut everything out below 20 hertz and everything above 16,000 hertz or something, you know, to make space in your mix down. Those areas like low cutting and high cutting the master or like your main groups like that, it's not really the actual problem usually. It's usually the actual separation between your sounds, like in the middle of the spectrum, that's like 99%. That's where the issue lies, you know. So yeah, focus more on all of your mid frequencies, getting everything separated. That's the key thing, really, you know. Low frequency reverb, suitable in intro breakdowns, keep minimal above 1,000 hertz in drops. Yeah, so it's kind of similar point to what I mentioned before, but yeah, often I will have like a lot of reverby low end sounds in the intro and breakdowns, like just for fun, like for experimentation. But yeah, on the drop, again, like if you stick to like 1,000 hertz, like rather than 500, then you know you're really in the clear, and you can like stack many reverbs on top of each other, like up from 1,000 hertz and upwards, and you won't have too many issues. But yeah, if you're doing it lower at 500, you have to be a bit more careful, and you wouldn't be able to really stack many on top of each other like that, because it would quickly eat up headroom, you know. And remember, when you cut at 500, you realistically still, it's not going to cut everything at 500. You're still going to have stuff down at 200, probably like a little bit, you know. So if you go up a bit higher to 1,000, it's a bit more. Yeah, it's going to be a bit cleaner. Like you're going to have to worry less. Okay. Smooth EQ, stack EQs rather than sharp cuts, especially on low high cuts. So yeah, I mentioned this in previous videos. Much better to run a couple of EQs over a sound to sculpt out the low end, or sculpt out some high end if you want, and do it nice and smoothly in stages rather than doing sharp cuts and stressing the EQ too much. Notches. Similar kind of thing. Use wider cues for smoother shaping, avoiding sharp notches. So I'm really not a big fan of, you know, when you have these frequency spikes and then getting a really tight like notch and then really dipping it down loads. It really distorts the whole quality of the sound when you EQ that way. So even if you've got big, you know, narrow frequency spikes, it's better to just still do a wider notch cut and bring it down, rather than, you know, like with a wider cue than a really sharp one, because again, smooth EQing is always the way, you know. So yeah, that's my tip for that. And then yeah, as we come towards the end here, mid-range mud. So this is sort of a little bit more of another old wives' tale of like you have to cut the mid-range on your bass kind of thing, which is really not essential. So yeah, maybe between 200 and 500 hertz would be where we would consider the mud range. But you don't have to do it if it doesn't sound muddy, you know. What might muddy up your spectrum there is because you've got a lot of conflicts with different sounds, where you then need to do some better EQing or side chaining. But generally, if the sound itself is not muddy in the area, in that mid-range area, especially the bass, like it's usually better to leave those frequencies in for the fullness of your bass, you know. So don't feel like you have to take that area out. Just make sure that you get, moving on to the next point, a lot of mid-range clarity by defining the mid-range sounds distinctly from one another, you know. So always making sure you know what's got the dominance in the mid-range at which particular moment in the song. And yeah, when you make sure you've got a really, really distinct, definitive mid-range with lots of space between the sounds, then that's gonna be the best kind of whole mix down advice, really, because the magic is always in the mid-range, you know. And you'll have much better translation of your sound across multiple devices, because the mid-range is the part of the track that's always going to sound the same across whatever you play it on, you know, like loudspeakers, on your phone, headphones. Like the mid-range is where it's always going to be the same kind of, like you're going to have the same kind of quality. So it's really usually the mid-range where you need to focus most of your attention on getting a great sound, you know. And yeah, just make sure you're really defining the mid-range sounds like well from one another and not having too many clashes, you know. And then yeah, finally, analyzer versus ears. Analyzers are great because you can kind of spot things that your ears might not have picked up, but at the end of the day, your ears are the final gatekeeper, so make sure you rely on those the most. And these rules are flexible, as I'd mentioned here. Have fun, break them if you want to. But someone just asked me to do like a little guideline, so this is like the 20 guidelines I came up with off the top of my head. Okay, but yeah, don't like use them as guidelines, but don't feel like you have to absolutely stick to them. All right, and yeah, feel free to write me in Discord if anything's unclear. Yeah, that's pretty much it for today. Hope that was helpful for some of you guys. And yeah, make sure you check out all the other links down below. I've got preset packs for Phase Plant and Vital. I've got one-on-one sessions available. Yeah, our Patreon is really, really cool. We've got a great Discord full of people really helping each other out a lot with technical things as well. And what else can I say? Oh yeah, come and follow my record label on Instagram and SoundCloud. Links for that are down below as well. We've got a new track coming out on the label this Friday. All right, my G's. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day. Peace out. Much love.